Alright, so before you scroll past thinking this is some clickbait garbage. Yeah, I get it, it sounds like it. But this actually happened. I don't even know if I should be writing this, but I've been carrying it around for too long. I haven't told anyone the full story, not even the cops, not even my therapist. But lately I've been having these dreams, same one, over and over, and I wake up with that metallic taste of fear in my mouth again. It's been 8 years, but it's like my body still thinks I'm back there. Trapped, counting breaths, listening to footsteps on the gravel outside. I guess I should start from the night it happened. It was October 2017. I was 24, living in a shitty apartment just outside Portland, Oregon. I was working at a car parts warehouse back then. One of those jobs where you clock in, zone out for 9 hours, and hope you don't lose a finger. My mom had called me earlier that day, talking about some family matter she wanted to discuss in person. She wouldn't tell me what it was over the phone, just that it was important and that I needed to come by on Saturday. Her tone was weird, shaky, like she'd been crying. But I didn't think too much of it. My family's always been complicated. Anyway, that night I went out with a couple of guys from work. It wasn't even supposed to be a big thing, just beers at this dive bar downtown. I left around midnight, sober enough to drive, but tired. The parking lot was mostly empty, streetlights flickering. I remember fumbling for my keys, hearing footsteps behind me. I turned around, no one there. Then I felt something cold press against my neck. Everything went black. When I came to, I was in this small, concrete room. Bare walls, no windows. Just a single bulb hanging from a wire, buzzing faintly. My wrists were tied with zip ties, and there was duct tape around my mouth. I could hear a generator humming somewhere far off. The air smelled like rust and mold. I had no idea how long I'd been out. At first, I thought it was a robbery or maybe a case of mistaken identity. I tried yelling through the tape, thrashing against the chair, anything. After a while, I just sat there, shaking, trying to make sense of it. Hours passed, I think. Eventually, the door opened, and this man walked in. Late 40s maybe, heavy coat, baseball cap pulled low. I couldn't see his face clearly. He just stood there, watching me for a second, like he was studying me. Then he said, "You look just like him." I didn't know what the hell that meant. He didn't say much after that. Just asked me my full name. When I told him, he nodded like he already knew. Then he said something that made my stomach twist. "You shouldn't exist." He left, and I sat there trying to figure out what that was supposed to mean. The next few days, or what felt like days, were a blur of fear, confusion, and pain. He'd come in sometimes, bring me water or food, but never talk much. Once, I tried to ask him why he was doing this. He didn't answer, just stared at me like he was seeing a ghost. On the third, maybe fourth, day, I heard him on the phone outside the door. His voice was muffled, but I caught a few words. "He doesn't know." Just like his father. Something about the way he said father made my chest tighten. See, my dad died when I was 10. Car accident. Or at least, that's what my mom always said. But suddenly that memory, the way she'd never let us see the body, the way she'd packed up and moved us across the country 2 months later, started feeling wrong. When he came back in, I decided to push. I told him I knew he'd made a mistake, that my family didn't have anything to do with whatever this was. He laughed, actually laughed, said, "You think your family's innocent?" I didn't even know how to respond. That night, I barely slept. Every creak, every sound outside the walls felt amplified. Around dawn, I heard a truck engine start up, then fade away. Silence. For hours, I sat there, heart pounding, wondering if he'd ever come back. When he finally did, he looked different, drained, like something had broken in him. He put down a small photo, an old one, on the floor in front of me. It was a picture of my mom, younger, smiling, her arm around some guy I didn't recognize. "That's my brother," he said quietly. "Your real father." My mind just stopped. He told me things, horrible things, that made no sense at the time. About lies, money, a cover-up. He said my mom had destroyed his family, that I was living proof of it. He said I wasn't supposed to be born, that my existence cost someone their life. I didn't believe him. I couldn't. But the way he said it, the rage in his eyes, mixed with something like grief, it didn't feel like a story. It felt like truth. That was the night I decided to escape. I don't even remember exactly how I did it. There was a moment when he left the door slightly ajar, maybe drunk or distracted. I broke the zip ties on the sharp edge of the chair, waited until I couldn't hear his footsteps, and ran. Just ran. Through the woods, barefoot, lungs burning. I ended up on a dirt road, flagged down a passing pickup, and somehow made it to a gas station. The police found the shack 2 days later. Empty. No trace of him. For months after, I tried to piece together what had happened. My mom refused to talk about it. Said it was someone unwell who'd targeted me randomly. But when I showed her that old photo, the one he'd left, she went pale. Like she'd seen a ghost. And that's when I knew. She was hiding something. Something big. Something that man was willing to kidnap me to expose. And now, 8 years later, I think I've finally started to uncover what that was. And it's worse than I ever imagined. After I escaped, I thought that was the end of it. I thought I could just file a report, change my locks, and move on with my life. But that's not how trauma works. It sticks to you. Every shadow looks like a threat. Every sound feels like a warning. For the first few months, I barely slept. I moved apartments twice. I couldn't stand the sound of footsteps in the hallway or the smell of wet concrete. It'd send me spiraling right back to that room. I tried therapy, but I couldn't even tell the therapist everything. How could I, when I wasn't sure what was real and what wasn't? The cops treated it like an isolated crime. They said the guy probably had a psychotic break or mistaken identity. When I mentioned what he'd said about my mom and my real father, they brushed it off. Said he was probably rambling nonsense to scare me. But I couldn't let it go. That picture haunted me. My mom, smiling, standing next to a man who looked vaguely like me. Same nose, same eyes, same smirk. I started digging. I looked through old photo albums, boxes in her attic, anything that might tell me who he was. Nothing. The picture he left was dated 1988, for years before I was born. So I did something stupid. I confronted her. It was a Sunday afternoon. I drove down to her place in Eugene. She was in the garden, trimming roses, pretending everything was fine. I asked her who the man in the photo was. She froze. Didn't even blink for a full 10 seconds. Then she said, "Where did you get that?" When I told her, she turned white. Not angry white, scared white. "Daniel, you shouldn't have gone looking for that," she said quietly. "He was dangerous. He hurt people. He hurt me." I asked if he was my dad. She said no, too fast, too sharp. Then she turned around, went inside, and locked the door. That was it. She didn't come back out. I sat in my car for almost an hour, just staring at her house, waiting for her to come out again. She never did. Over the next few weeks, I tried calling her. She wouldn't pick up. Then one day, I got a text from an unknown number. "Stop digging, or you'll end up back where you were." I swear I felt my blood freeze. I showed the text to the police, but they said it couldn't be traced. It came from a burner. Could be anyone, they said. People mess with victims all the time after media coverage. Except there wasn't any media coverage. The cops hadn't released my name. Only a handful of people even knew about the kidnapping. My mom, my brother, and the police. Which meant someone close knew. I didn't tell my brother right away. Mark's 2 years younger than me, married with a kid. He's always been the golden boy, the responsible one. When I finally called him and told him everything, he sounded off. Not shocked. Not like I'd expected. "Dan, maybe you should just leave it," he said. "If mom's not talking, she's got her reasons." It was the same tone he used when we were kids, when he wanted me to stop pushing for answers about our dad's accident. I told him I couldn't leave it. That man knew things about me no random stranger could. And he had a photo that didn't exist anywhere else. Mark got quiet. Then he said, "Don't come to the house for a while, okay?" That night, I couldn't stop replaying it in my head. Don't come to the house. Like he was protecting me. Or hiding something. A few days later, I went back through the police report. They'd logged the address where they found me. An abandoned hunting cabin about an hour east of Salem. I looked it up on Google Maps. The land was registered to a shell company. And that company was linked to another one. And another. Until finally, one of them traced back to a man named Charles Whitmore. The name hit me like a punch. Whitmore was my mom's maiden name. I barely slept that night. I kept thinking about the kidnapper's voice. Rough, angry, but familiar somehow. Like I'd heard it when I was younger. By morning, I made up my mind. I was going to find out who Charles Whitmore was. I drove to the county records office. The clerk there didn't think much of it when I asked for public documents. Property ownership, business filings, death certificates. It took a couple hours, but I found him. Charles Whitmore. Born 1963. Deceased. Died in 1994. Except, get this, The death certificate was signed by my mother. I stared at the paper, not even breathing. My mom had signed off on this man's death when I was barely a kid. And the reason listed for death? Accidental overdose. I left the office with my hands shaking. Everything started to connect in fragments. My father's car accident. The sudden move to Oregon. The way my mom panicked when I showed her that photo. I called her again. No answer. I texted her. I know about Charles. Within an hour, my phone started blowing up, but not from her. From my brother. What the hell are you doing, Dan? Leave this alone. Please. You don't understand. He sounded terrified. And that's when I realized. He wasn't trying to protect Mom. He was trying to protect me. That night, I got another text from that unknown number. Just one line this time. He wasn't lying. I didn't sleep at all. I started going back through old boxes, trying to find anything from before we moved to Oregon. School photos, family trips, anything. There were barely any pictures of Dad, and none of Charles. But then I found something buried at the bottom of an old metal box. A birth certificate. My birth certificate. Except the father's name wasn't the one I grew up believing. It wasn't Richard Evans. It was Charles Whitmore. I dropped the paper. My hands were trembling so badly I could barely breathe. It suddenly all made sense. The man's words, my mother's fear, my brother's silence. The man who kidnapped me wasn't some stranger. He was family, and he'd been trying to show me the truth my mother spent her entire life hiding. After I found that birth certificate, something inside me broke. Like, actually broke. I sat on my apartment floor with that piece of paper in my hands, staring at my own name printed next to a man I'd never met. A man who supposedly died when I was 2. A man my mother told everyone was a dangerous mistake. It was like my entire life had been built on a lie. I didn't even know who I was anymore. That night, I couldn't stop replaying everything the man in the cabin had said. His words suddenly had context. Terrifying, sickening context. You shouldn't exist. Your family destroyed mine. It wasn't random. It was personal. I started looking up everything I could about Charles Whitmore. But there was barely anything online. No obituaries, no photos, no news articles. It was like he'd been erased. So I went back to the records office. This time I asked about next of kin, inheritance documents, any record that connected Charles to my mom. The clerk pulled up an old file and said there was one name listed as the emergency contact at the time of his death. Robert Whitmore. I asked if there was an address on file. There was. Old, but still there. A rural property near Bend, Oregon. I don't know what I was expecting to find when I drove out there. Maybe an empty house. Maybe some old man who didn't even remember my mom. What I found instead was a small, weathered farmhouse with a rusted truck in the yard and an "No trespassing" sign half buried in weeds. I parked down the road, walked up to the porch, and knocked. A man answered. Maybe late 50s. Gray stubble, flannel shirt, eyes that looked tired. But the second he saw me, those eyes changed. Widened. "You're her boy," he said quietly. My mouth went dry. "You knew my mother?" He nodded slowly, opening the door. "Come in, before someone sees you." The inside of the house smelled like old coffee and sawdust. Every wall was lined with photos, some of kids, some of landscapes, but a few of them caught my eye immediately. My mom, younger, laughing, and next to her, the same man from the photo the kidnapper had shown me. Charles. "You're Daniel, right?" the man asked. "She said you were dead." I froze. "What?" "She told us you died. Back in '94. Said you and your father were both gone." My knees almost gave out. "Who are you?" He took a deep breath. "Robert Whitmore, Charles's brother." My head was spinning. "Then that means—" "Yeah," he said softly. "I'm your uncle." I couldn't even process it. My uncle. The man who kidnapped me was my uncle. Except no, that didn't add up. The man who'd taken me looked younger, maybe late 40s at the time. Robert was in his 50s now. This guy had to be someone else. Was there anyone else? I asked. Another brother? Robert's expression darkened. He turned toward the window, jaw tightening. There was Matthew, but he disappeared after Charles died. I felt my stomach twist. "He's been off for years," Robert continued. "He blamed your mother for everything. Said she tricked Charles. Said she ruined our family." I told him what happened. That Matthew had kidnapped me. That he'd known things no stranger could know. Robert just stood there for a long time, not saying a word. Then he said, almost to himself, "So he finally did it." "Did what?" "Made her pay." I wanted to scream. None of this made sense. I wasn't part of their feud. I was just collateral. Robert must have seen it on my face because he said, "You didn't deserve any of this, kid. But your mom, she's not innocent in what happened." I asked what he meant. He hesitated, then walked to a drawer and pulled out an old newspaper clipping, yellowed with age. The headline read, "Local man found dead in suspected overdose." There was a photo of Charles. I told him I'd already seen the death certificate, that my mom had signed it. He nodded, because she was there. She said it was an accident. He gave a bitter laugh. Of course she did. But it wasn't. Charles was clean. Had been for years. Then suddenly he's found dead. She vanishes with her baby. And 2 months later she's married to another man? You tell me what that sounds like. I didn't want to believe him. But every piece fit too neatly. When I asked if there was proof, Robert said he'd tried for years to get the police to reopen the case. They said it was closed. No signs of foul play. "Your mom was always good at cleaning up her messes," he muttered. I left that house feeling like my head was full of static. I drove back to Portland, sat in my car for hours outside my apartment, staring at nothing. If what Robert said was true, my mom might have killed my biological father. And my uncle, the one who kidnapped me, might have done it because he thought I was her accomplice. I didn't even know what truth I wanted anymore. That night, I tried calling my mom again. No answer. I texted, "I know about Matthew." Still nothing. The next morning, I got another message from that same unknown number. This one had an attachment, a photo. It was me, from that night at the bar before I was taken. Underneath it was a text. "You were never supposed to find him." I don't know how to describe the kind of fear that grips you when you realize you're still being watched. I locked every window, checked every door, stayed up till dawn with a baseball bat in my hands. By morning, I made a decision. I couldn't keep waiting for answers to come to me. If my mom wouldn't talk, I'd confront her face to face. So I drove to Eugene again. Her car was in the driveway, but the house looked empty. I knocked. No answer. I called out for her. Silence. The door wasn't locked, so I pushed it open. Inside, everything was too quiet. The smell of stale coffee, the hum of the fridge, that eerie stillness of a house that hasn't been lived in for days. Then I saw it, the photo frame on the mantel. It was a family picture of her, me, and Mark from years ago, except the glass was cracked. And next to it, on the counter, was a note. Just one line. "I tried to protect you, but he found me first." I didn't even realize I was crying until the words blurred. My mom was gone, and somewhere out there, so was Matthew. And if he'd already found her, I knew I was next. After finding that note, everything went numb. Not fear, not shock, just this hollow, electric buzzing in my chest. I called her name again, even though I knew she wasn't there. The whole house felt wrong. The couch cushions slightly out of place, a mug shattered in the sink, curtains drawn when she never kept them that way. I called 911. My voice barely worked. The dispatcher kept asking if there were signs of forced entry. I told them no, but the front door had been unlocked. I told them about the note, and they sent officers within 15 minutes. They searched the place for hours. Found her purse, her phone, and her car keys. All still there. No blood, no obvious struggle. Just gone. Like she'd been erased, same as Charles. They filed a missing person report. The detective assigned to it, a woman named Evans, no relation, I checked, kept giving me that look cops give when they think you're holding something back. And I guess I was. I didn't tell her about Matthew, or that I'd already been kidnapped once by someone tied to all this. I just couldn't bring myself to say the words. The moment I did, it'd all sound insane. But later that night, I sat on her porch steps, scrolling through her phone, which the cops had let me keep since I was listed as her emergency contact. I went through her messages, her calls, her photos. Mostly normal stuff. Grocery lists, church group chats, Mark texting her pictures of his kid. Then I found a text chain from an unsaved number. Weeks of messages. The most recent one said, "We both know he'll come looking. You can't hide forever." And the last one she sent back was, "If he finds Daniel, it's over." I don't think I even breathed for a full minute. The number was different from the one that had been threatening me, but it didn't matter. It all led to the same place. Someone was playing this game behind the scenes, and I was the prize. I went home that night, packed a duffel bag, and left town. I didn't even tell Mark where I was going. I just drove east, toward Idaho, stopping at motels under fake names. For the first time in my life, I felt like prey. Every time I saw headlights in my rearview mirror, I imagined it was him. Every stranger in a diner felt like a threat. I started keeping my phone off except when I absolutely needed it. But one morning, curiosity got the better of me, and I turned it back on just long enough to see if there were any updates from the police. There was one text waiting, from a new number. "You can't hide from blood, Daniel." I threw the phone against the wall so hard it cracked. That night, I checked into a rundown motel outside Boise. The kind with flickering lights and cigarette burns in the sheets. I couldn't sleep, so I poured through every document I'd taken from Mom's house. Birth certificates, letters, photos. Then I found something I'd missed before. It was a letter addressed to M. Whitmore, postmarked 2 weeks before I was kidnapped. Inside, in my mother's handwriting, it said, "If you're reading this, I'm done running. You were right about some things. Charles wasn't supposed to die, but neither of us were innocent. Please, leave Daniel out of it. He doesn't know. He doesn't need to." I just stared at it, reading it over and over. She admitted it. Something happened between her and Charles. Maybe an accident, maybe worse, but she knew it. And Matthew had been coming for her ever since. That's when it hit me. Maybe she didn't run this time. Maybe she let him find her. I drove back to Oregon the next morning. Didn't even tell the cops I was coming. I just needed to see for myself. When I got to Eugene, there were patrol cars parked near the house again. I asked Detective Evans what was going on. She said they'd gotten an anonymous tip. Someone had seen a man matching Matthew's description near a cabin up in the Cascades. Same direction as before. I don't know what possessed me, but I didn't wait. I drove straight there. It took almost 3 hours along winding forest roads, my GPS barely clinging to a signal. Eventually, I saw the old dirt turnoff that led into the woods. My headlights caught the outline of a small structure at the end of the trail. It looked almost identical to the place I'd been held before. When I got out of the car, I could smell smoke. Not fire, just that faint, lingering scent of something recently burned. The door was open. Inside, the air was thick with dust and ash. The walls were scorched in patches, but there, in the middle of the room, was something that made my stomach twist. A picture frame. The same one from Mom's mantle. Her, me, and Mark. Half burned. And beside it, another note. "You wanted the truth. It's in the ashes." I started tearing through the place, coughing, half delirious. Under a pile of debris near the corner, I found a metal lockbox. The key was already in it. Inside were papers, old ones, brittle at the edges. Medical forms, adoption papers, a police report. The police report was from 1994. It listed Charles Whitmore as deceased and cause of death, head trauma. Not overdose, not accidental. Head trauma. And in the person of interest section, her name. My mother's. I just sat there, staring at that line, feeling everything tilt sideways. Before I could even process what I was holding, I heard a noise outside. Gravel crunching. Someone walking. I turned off my flashlight and froze. My heart was hammering so hard it hurt. Then a voice. Low, calm, familiar. "You shouldn't have come back, Daniel." It was him. Matthew. He stepped into the doorway, face shadowed, same baseball cap as before. He looked older, thinner, but his eyes still had that same glassy, haunted intensity. "You weren't supposed to find this," he said. "None of it was meant for you." I didn't say anything. Couldn't. He took another step forward. "She took everything from us. My brother, our family, our lives. You're the reminder of what she did. The reason she got away with it for so long." I tried to back away, but there was nowhere to go. My back hit the wall. "She didn't kill him, did she?" I asked. He didn't answer at first. Then, quietly, not directly. "What does that mean?" "She made him do it." He reached into his jacket. My stomach dropped. I thought he was going to pull a gun. But instead, he took out a small cassette tape. "This," he said, holding it up, "is the truth." Before I could move, he tossed it at my feet. Then he turned and walked out into the dark. No threats this time. No chase. Just gone. When the police arrived, because yeah, I called them immediately, Matthew was already long gone again. They took the papers, the box, the tape. I told them everything, every single detail this time. They promised to analyze the tape, but something in Detective Evans's tone told me she didn't expect much. That night, I sat in my car outside the police station, staring at my reflection in the window, wondering if I even wanted to know what was on that tape. But deep down, I already knew it wasn't just about my mother anymore. It was about the truth she'd buried, and what it had cost everyone around her. And I had this gut feeling. The worst part was still coming. The police kept the cassette for a week before I got it back. Detective Evans called and said it was evidence, but since the case had gone cold again and no fingerprints were found, she couldn't justify keeping it any longer. "There's nothing on it," she told me over the phone. "Just silence." But I knew that wasn't true. When I picked it up from the precinct, I noticed the label, worn, half-faded letters and handwriting I instantly recognized. My mother's. It said, June 3rd, 1994. That was the day my father, Charles, died. I didn't even wait to get home. I drove to a thrift store, bought an old tape player for $10, and sat in my car in the parking lot, heart pounding as I pressed play. At first, it really did sound like silence. Just static, faint humming. Then, slowly, a man's voice faded in. Charles. He sounded drunk, but not slurring. More like desperate, like someone talking to themselves to stay sane. "Maggie, please, just listen. I know what you did. I know about the money, about the company. I don't care about any of that anymore. I just want to see my son." Then there was movement. Footsteps. A woman's voice, my mother's. "You can't. You'll ruin everything. Robert already knows. And if he tells Matthew." She stopped, like she realized she'd said too much. "You don't get to keep him from me," Charles said. "He's mine, Maggie. You can't pretend he's not. You were never supposed to have him." She snapped back. "You weren't supposed to be here." Then something fell. A chair maybe. The sound of struggling. And then, a crack. Loud. Final. After that came her voice again, shaking, crying. "Oh God, Charles. Please, please no." Static swallowed everything. I sat there for maybe 10 minutes before I realized I was still holding my breath. My whole body was shaking. It wasn't murder, not exactly, but it wasn't an accident either. It was a fight that got out of control. She killed him, probably by accident. But she covered it up, staged the overdose, and ran. Took me with her. And somehow, for decades, she lived with it. I thought that was it, the end of the story. The truth, finally. But the next morning, I got another message. No number, no name, just a file. A voice recording. "You heard the tape," the voice said. "It was Matthew. Now you know why she ran. But you don't know the rest." He paused. I could hear him breathing. Robert helped her. He signed off on the paperwork. They both took the insurance money and disappeared. When I found her years later, she lied again. Said you were dead. Said she buried you. I wanted to believe her. I really did. The voice trembled. "But then I saw you, Daniel. Grown. Breathing. Living the life that should have been my brother's." Then he said something I'll never forget. "You're not the victim in this story. You're the reminder. Every time I see you, I see the blood she washed off her hands." The recording cut off there. I just sat at my kitchen table, the morning light cutting through the blinds, my hands pressed against my face. There was no villain, no hero, just generations of people ruining each other's lives to protect their own lies. When I called Detective Evans to tell her about the recording, she sounded exhausted. "We've got nothing on this guy. He's like a ghost. If he wanted you dead, you'd be dead. I think he wants you to suffer." She wasn't wrong. Over the next few weeks, I tried to go back to normal. I went to work, saw my therapist, stopped checking my phone every 5 minutes. But the damage was done. My mom was still missing. Matthew was still out there. And every time I looked in the mirror, I saw both of them. Her guilt in my eyes, his rage in my jawline. Then, one night, I got a call. Unknown number. When I answered, no one spoke. I was about to hang up when I heard something faint in the background. Waves. The ocean. And then, quietly, a woman's voice. "Daniel." It was her. My mom. My throat tightened. "Mom? Where are you? Please, just tell me." Static. Then the line went dead. I called back over and over, but it was disconnected. I traced every coastal town she'd ever talked about visiting. Astoria, Lincoln City, Seaside. I drove for days, hoping for something, anything. Nothing. Until 3 weeks later, when Detective Evans called again. They'd found a body washed up near Coos Bay. Female, late 50s, confirmed by dental records. It was her. There was no sign of foul play. They said it looked like suicide. She'd left a note in her pocket. "He finally found me. I can't run anymore. Tell Daniel I'm sorry. Tell him the truth wasn't meant to hurt him. It was meant to free him." I didn't cry. Not right away. I just stood there in that sterile little police office, holding the paper, feeling everything collapse in on itself. After the funeral, I drove back to that cabin one last time. It had been cleaned out by then, boarded up, half reclaimed by the woods. I stood in the same spot I'd been chained to years before, and for the first time, I didn't feel afraid. Just empty. Because the truth wasn't what I'd wanted, it was worse. My father died because of a fight that never should have happened. My mother spent her life running from it. My uncle spent his life trying to avenge it. And me? I was the living reminder of all of it. The police never found Matthew. He vanished completely. No more texts, no more threats, nothing. Sometimes I wonder if he's still out there, watching. Other times I think maybe he got what he wanted, the truth out in the open. A few months ago, I uploaded everything, the recordings, the photos, the letters, to a private drive and shared it with a few journalists. None of them have published it yet. Too risky, too messy, too unverified. But I know what's real. And if you're reading this, I guess this is me doing what she couldn't. Putting it somewhere it can't be buried again. Because people like to say the truth sets you free. But that's a lie. The truth doesn't set you free. It chains you to everything you tried to escape. And sometimes, it follows you home. If you made it all the way to the end, thanks for sticking with me. I really appreciate it. If you enjoyed the story, consider subscribing to the channel and giving the video a like. It helps me share more stories like this. Thanks.